Hey, everybody. Are we ready to get real? Welcome to the Get Real podcast. I'm your host, Blaine Mengel. Good to be with you. Episode 2 of the podcast tonight. Wow, do I have a lot to talk about. Firstly, let's take a deep breath. I'm going to start today off with a quote. I heard this quote. I don't know who the author of this quote was, but it's an awesome quote, so I'm going to share it with you. The life-changing ideas of our world are formed by the insane beliefs of stubborn men and women unwilling to conform to society's boundaries and have their own genius shrouded by the tired ideas of others. That really struck me, and I did not make up that quote, but I added, in my notes, I added this: be different, be you, and change the world. Right? Like, I heard Bob Proctor say this one time. He said, if you want to find the reservoir of the biggest reservoir of unfulfilled dreams, go to a graveyard. Because 90% or more, think about it. I don't want to really put a number on it, but it's a high number, guys, die without ever realizing why they were actually even on this planet, you know? And at 55 years old, I have done a lot of things. You know, I've been a professional bass fisherman. I had a TV show. I've had 5 kids, 2 marriages, worked in the medical field. I've tried college. I've tried business school. I've tried online businesses and brick and mortar businesses and podcasts and, you know, social media marketing, all of it. I've tried a lot. I was in ministry. I was a missionary. I served in Kenya briefly. You know, I've done a lot of things, and I'm grateful for all of it. But right now, in this now moment, because aren't we all like really searching? Aren't we seeking? You know, a lot of religious, I don't want to say religious, a lot of spiritual writings, I'll say it that way, because down through the ages, most spiritual movements, they agree on a couple of things. They don't agree on much, but they do agree on a few things. One of the things they agree on is seek and you shall find. And you could add if you search with all your heart. Now, what we know today, scientifically and spiritually, is that the heart and the mind are conjoined. You know, the saying, as a man or woman thinks in his or her heart, so is he or she. Your heart can think. The energy kind of gets processed differently, but you think with your mind and you think with your heart, right? So we're all kind of seeking. And in this moment today, like in any one moment, regardless of where you are in your life, aren't you still kind of really seeking? Like if I've arrived, and I had a mentor who used to say this, there's no finish line, Blaine. There is no finish line. Enjoy it. Enjoy the process. And I was just like, there was a lot of times I didn't like the process because the process brought pain. You know, the process was painful sometimes. Going up a mountain, you're dealing with animals and you're dealing with weather and wind and cold and the terrain and the slope, you know, and it hurts, you know, but seek and you shall find if you search with all your heart. So I really like that quote. We're all in a now moment, an I am now moment. And that moment that I just said that to you, I can never get it back. Every breath you take, it's the last breath like that you're going to take. You know, every move you make, every thought is just that. It's a thought. And how many hundreds, thousands of thoughts do you have every day? And they're all now moments. And I wanted to get that kind of foundation for today. And I'm going to try to be brief, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how my fishing business got started, because there's a really interesting story involved there. I was married. I had 2 kids and a 3rd child on the way, and I had a mentor in my life who he did a lot of listening to me. You know, he did a whole lot of listening to me. A lot of listening to me whine, a lot of listening to me complain. And the reason why that was the case was because I wasn't happy with what I was doing in my life. I was doing the dance, you do the dance, and I was doing the dance. I was working a full-time 8-hour-a-day job, benefits, 401k, the whole bit, and I was unfulfilled. I wasn't happy. And I was complaining one afternoon after I had gotten home from I was a nurse's aide in a nursing home. It's a tough job. That is a really hard job emotionally. It's a hard job physically. I lifted patients on and off toilets and commodes and in and out of bed, and I wasn't happy. And that was me. Some people, that's a very fulfilling job. It just wasn't working for me. And I was complaining one afternoon when I got home, and he started to laugh. And I said, "What are you laughing at?" He said, You're thinking depressing thoughts again. That's why you're depressed, Blaine, because you're thinking depressing thoughts. And I said, "Well, what do I do?" He said, "Blaine, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "What do I want to do?" What do you mean, what do I want to do? That didn't even register when he first asked it. Do you understand that that's the case for most people today? Because nobody's ever asked a lot of people what they want to do. It's what you're supposed to do. It's what the educational system, what the religious system, what the government, what significant others in your life want you to do, expect you to do, in order to be this identity that you have either created for yourself or they have put on you. And nobody had ever asked me that question before. Nobody had ever asked me, what do you want to do? And I never asked myself that question. So I had to take the blame and take it off of everybody else in that moment when he asked me that question, because he asked me that question. I didn't know the answer because I had never asked myself the question. And I didn't answer him. So I don't know how much time went by, weeks, days, I don't remember exactly. But again, he asked me the question, "Blaine, what do you want to do?" And I was in a fighting mood at that moment. And I said, "I want to fish." Just like that. I said, "I want to fish." And he laughed. He said, "Great. You couldn't answer the question when I asked you last time." And he laughed, and I laughed, and he said, "So go fishing." And I was like, "Yeah, right." He says, "What do you mean, yeah, right?" And I said these words. I'll never forget this. I said it, and I quote, "You can't make a living fishing." And I laughed as if he was dumb, like I laughed. Now, this guy was a roofer, right? Didn't know the first thing about fishing, but he knew the first thing about people. And that was the important point. And he said to me, "So all those guys you watch on Saturday mornings that run around with those real famous or those real fancy boats and catch all those bass, those TV personalities that you love, you watch them and you go out there and you try to mimic them and all that stuff. You don't think they're getting paid?" And I was dumbfounded. I was just like, "Well, of course they're getting paid." He said, "Well, they can't be because you just told me that you can't get paid fishing." And he had me, of course. And so I started to do some research. And to shorten the story a little bit, because I was scared, and I'll get into the fear a little bit in a minute, I decided, yeah, okay, I'm going to start fishing a couple of the local rivers for trout, maybe some smallmouth bass, and I'll get a drift boat. Now, drift boats, anybody who knows anything about boats and fishing and rivers and guiding, when you're operating a drift boat, you're not fishing. First of all, you are spending your whole day steering and holding in current. It's you don't have you can use an anchor at some points if you need to, or a drag chain or something like that. But it's work. Like, it's really work. And there's no fishing involved for the person operating the boat, okay? So I told him this. I says, "I'm going to do this." And he just let me go for, I don't know, for a period of time. I mean, my mother-in-law at the time actually bought me a drift boat operating book for Christmas that year. And I started to read it. And I'm not a book reader. I love audiobooks. I'm not real into reading. I'm a visual and audio person. I like to hear it and I like to see it. Like in pictures and images and visions and graphically, not words. I'm not real good at reading. So one day I'm talking to him, and I just said, man, I was complaining about it. I'm like, this is gonna be tough, and blah blah. He said, you're a fisherman, aren't you? You said you wanted to make money fishing. I said, yeah. He said, you're gonna be making money rowing boats. You ain't gonna be fishing. You're gonna be rowing boats. He says, I don't know about you, Blaine. He said, but from what I do know about you, you want to just get in a boat, turn a key, start that thing, and go, and get to a spot and start fishing. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really good, but, and I made excuse after excuse after excuse. And most of the excuses, I should say, revolved around money. Because I had this real lack of a capacity to even understand money. And that's why I'm starting this podcast with this story, because subsequent podcasts coming forth we're going to lead into something here. So I went to a boat dealership that following weekend, and I looked at jet boats. I looked at a bass boat with a jet motor. Now, jet motor, if you know anything about jet motors are an outboard motor, but they remove the propeller part of the motor and they install an impeller with a lower unit so that you can, so you can traverse much shallower rivers, streams, and even some of the shallow lakes, because I wanted to fish the river. And I went and I looked at this boat, and I found a great boat for a beginner. For me, never having a boat, I was like, this is an awesome boat. It had a nice little 40-30 Mercury jet motor on it, and I was excited. And I'm talking to my mentor all the way home. And about 20 minutes into the conversation, he says, so did you get it? And I said, well, no, I didn't get it. He said, why not? And I said, well, because I don't have the money to get it. Oh, okay. Just that simple. Oh, okay, he said. So we're talking, and about, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes later, I mentioned to him about a $13,000 retirement fund that I had gotten from my nursing home job when I left the nursing home, because I'd gone to school and I was working at an ophthalmology office as a certified ophthalmic assistant at the time. And he said, whoa. He said, 5 minutes ago, you just told me you didn't have any money. And I said, I don't have any money. He said, you just told me you had $13,000 in a retirement account. And I said, well, yeah, that's retirement. And he says, and I quote, what the hell does a fisherman do when he retires? Now, I was just like, I don't know. And he said, why didn't you buy that boat? And I said, I don't have the money. And I fought with him about this, another 5 or 10 minutes. I'm back and forth and I'm making excuses. He said, Blaine, why did you not buy the boat? And I'm being straightforward here. I said, because I'm afraid of what she's going to think if I spend that money. He said, exactly. He said, what you're going to do for your kids and your wife is go into business for yourself. You're going to be a happier person. And he laid this all out. And when he laid it out, it made total and complete sense to me. And I went back and I took a deposit on the boat. And then 5 days later, when some of that money from that account came forth in a check, I purchased my first boat. And in doing so, I spent that whole first year driving out to the Susquehanna River and going into the Delaware from time to time. The Delaware was obviously closer, but that was a whole nother, battle in my mind. The Susquehanna was better fishing. So I had to guide out there. I couldn't guide on the Delaware. It was only 20 minutes away from where I lived, but I couldn't guide there because nobody really wanted to fish there. The fish were bigger. I had excuse after excuse. You can make progress or you can make excuses, but you can't do both. And trust me, with where I am right now and with where I've been in my life, that is a fact. You can make progress or you can make excuses. And a lot of us, because we don't really know what we want in a given moment, it's just a hell of a lot easier to either A, point the finger at somebody else, or B, make an excuse. And I'm going to tell you something. there's only one thing better than an excuse, one thing more damaging to a human being who wants to move forward than an excuse, and that's a good one. Because, man, if I can justify in my head that it's a good excuse, I will argue until you see it my way. The point is, my mentor never saw it my way because he was doing better than me. And he would just say, your best thinking got you where you are. He said, maybe you ought to listen to somebody who's where you want to go. And that's why I started this podcast with that story. Because so many of us don't know what we want. We don't know where we want to be in any one moment. Let me ask you a question today. Are you happy in this very moment where you're standing right now as you're listening to this podcast? Are you fulfilled in your life? Are you at peace with yourself and others? Are you content? Is anything missing? Is anything broken? Is anything lacking? The word in the Hebrew, shalom, peace, contentment, placid, as in like water, not having a ripple on it, nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing lacking. What do you want to do with your life? Bob Proctor, what do you really want? And my mentor said that. Blaine, what do you really want? And the first couple times I'm sure he probably asked it, I didn't know. Because in this system, and we're going to get into this real deep because, between fishing and the ministry, being in missions and my online businesses, it fits right into this whole idea. And you guys get to go along for the ride with me, and it's going to be a fun ride because I'm getting back into fishing, which I'm real excited about, and that brings me to this point, and I'll be brief on this, but this podcast, the Get Real podcast, is brought to you by Gamma, Polyflex, copolymer fishing line, Gamma Torque, braided fishing line, and Gamma Edge, fluorocarbon fishing line. The best, the most subtle, most castable, and most abrasion-resistant line that I have ever used. And I use it in rivers. I use the braid in weedy, woody lakes. And I've used the Edge fluorocarbon in cold, clear rivers and lakes. I said, it's the best. Gamma. Black Knight Industries. If you want more information on that, reach out to me privately and I'll give it to you. So in closing for this episode, after you're done listening to this, go to the mirror, look in the mirror and ask yourself, say your first name, just your first name. What do you really want? Can you answer that question? If you can't answer that question, that's okay. That's okay. A seed has been planted. The kingdom is as a man who scatters seed. James Allen, and I won't quote it from his masterpiece book, As a Man Thinketh. Your mind is likened unto a garden, every thought a seed. Some of those seeds get cultivated to fruit and some to weeds. So plant that seed. What do you really want? And in the next few episodes, I want you to come back and join me because we're going to expand on this idea. I'm going to share a little bit about how I got my TV show, how I got into the ministry, how I became a missionary, some of the cool things I saw there, and what got me to this point today. So, and the reason why it's such an important concept, this what do you really want? What do you want to do? Look, you can say what you want about a lot of things, and I'll get into a lot more of the technical ideas of this moving forward. The system that we are all in this corporation called the United States, I'll get into more of that. It was put in place to defraud the people. And I don't know what the number is, what the percentage is, but the reality is very clear. Look around you. Depression, anxiety, divorce, alcohol consumption, stress, disease, sickness, doctor bills, pharma, the government, all of it, education. What's happening? What's the percentage of people that have disease because of the stresses of not being where they want to be, not being with who they want to be with, not doing what they want to do? This system perpetrates a lot of our sicknesses, our stresses, our diseases, our financial insecurities, and all that on us. And if there is another way, let's find it together. Hey, this is Blaine Mengel. Thanks so much for joining me on the Get Real podcast. Join me again next time, and we're going to get into a little bit more about this whole idea of what do you want. I like to break down words, so we'll get into some word etymologies, and we're going to go deep. We're going to get real. Have a great rest of your week.